We're going to talk about every single status effect in Dead by Daylight so far, but that's not all, because at the end of the video we're going to go over every single indicator and what they mean, so stay tuned. We're going to take this from A to Z following the alphabet, so we're starting with the B for Blessed. And the Blessed status effect is basically exclusive to boon totems. Whenever you're in the 24-meter range of a boon totem and you're granted a buff, this is when you'll see this status effect pop up on your HUD. Following the Blessed status effect, we've got the Blindness status effect, and this one's kind of unique because apart from just affecting survivors, this one can also affect killers. And basically what it does is it prevents anyone from seeing any sort of auras whenever they're affected by the Blindness status effect. So for example, the effect from barbecue and chili, you won't be able to see anyone through walls, and also for survivors, they cannot see their friends on their hooks, or the killers cannot see generator auras. Next up, we've got the Bloodlust status effect. Basically what this does is whenever a killer is chasing a survivor and they cannot catch up, this gives them an edge so they can catch up again. And I think this is quite an outdated effect. I'll get into that in a second, but basically once you chase someone for 15 seconds without stopping to do anything, you will gain a 0.2 meter per second movement speed boost, and this goes up to 25 seconds, which gives you 0.4 meters per second, and at 35 you'll gain a 0.6 meter per second boost. I always compare this to Mario Kart. If you have played Mario Kart and you're like in last place, you'll get the most OP power-ups like the bullet bill. In my opinion, this is kind of like a bullet bill. Like, you're so far behind, you need this kind of boost to catch up, and I think it's just not needed in Dead by Daylight anymore, or it needs to be tweaked or taken out. Something else I should mention is whenever you have Bloodlust and you stop to do anything like break a pallet or use your power, you will lose your Bloodlust status effect. So that's something you should know. Following Bloodlust, we've got the Broken status effect, and this is an effect that can only be applied to survivors, and it means they cannot heal past the Injured status effect. So whenever you're broken as a survivor, whether someone else tries to heal you or you want to heal yourself, you just cannot become fully healthy again. This is mostly dependent on perks. For example, Deliverance, if you unhook yourself, you will not be able to heal yourself for a period of time, and you really have to learn to play around these situations where you're broken so you don't get one hit by the killer. Next up, we've got the Curse status effect, and this is basically exactly like the boon status effect, Blessed, where if you're cursed by a hex totem from a killer, this is when you'll see the Curse status effect. Although keep in mind that it doesn't mean that whenever a hex totem is up that you'll see it. You'll most likely only see it whenever you're actually affected by that hex totem. This is probably done so that you don't gain an unfair advantage, knowing that, for example, Ruin is up while you don't even know that Ruin is up because you haven't touched a gen, for example. Next up, we have got the Deep Wound status effect. This is basically an effect that you can treat like an extra health state. So you've got Healthy, then you've got the Injured state, then you've got the Deep Wound state, and then after the Deep Wound state, you'd go into the Dying state. And this effect, whenever you have it applied, it basically means that you took a hit that you were not supposed to take. You technically were about to die, but some sort of effect kept you alive, and that's why you're now in this state. And as kind of like a penalty, you have this 20-second bar that goes down, and whenever it's down, it appears next to your icon, and if it goes down, then you go into the Dying state. And to prevent this, you can mend yourself, and this takes 12 seconds, and when you've mended it, it goes away. Something else to keep in mind is that this bar will not go down as long as you're running, but if you're doing anything else but running or mending yourself, it will go down. So you cannot do generators or heal others, because if you do, then you're gonna end up dying on the ground. Moving on to the letter E, we have got the Endurance status effect. And basically what Endurance does, it makes you temporarily invincible. So if you've got Endurance and you get hit, whether it's by a basic attack or killer power, instead of going down, you now go into the Deep Wound status effect, and you will not actually go dying on the ground, which is really nice. You can get this from, for example, Borrow Time, being hit off of the hook, or Styptic Agent. Since recently, it also goes away whenever you do any conspicuous actions. So if you touch a generator, if you heal, the Endurance status effect goes away. So be careful of that. Next up, we've got the Exhausted status effect. And these belong to, you guessed it, exhaustion perks. Basically what exhaustion perks are they're very, 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 very strong perks that as downside have a cooldown. So whenever you use one of these perks, for example Sprint Burst, Dead Heart, a timer will go down, which is the exhausted status effect, and once it goes down, then you can use it again. This meter will not go down though when you're running, so you need to either stand still, walk around, do gens, do anything but run, because when you're running, this meter will not go down and your exhaustion status effect will not go away. But the plus side is whenever you get hooked and you get unhooked, the exhaustion status effect will always be gone, so you can always use your perks from the hook. Next up, we have one of the most important status effects in the entire game, and it's called Exposed. The reason why it's so important is because whenever you hear this sound, you will be able to be knocked into the dying state in a single basic attack. Killer powers don't apply, so don't worry about those, but whenever you get hit by a basic attack, whenever you're exposed, you will go down immediately, and the only way you can prevent this is if you have the endurance status effect like we talked about before. Then we've got the Hehemorrhage status effect, and this one was recently buffed. So what it used to do is it would make survivors bleed more, so killers would be able to see the survivors more easily, would see the blood pool up, but let's be real, that was kind of bad. So as a buff, they now made it regress healing progress. This means that if you heal up to 80% and you have the hemorrhage status effect and the killer comes by, you run away, now every second that you don't heal, it will regress by 7%. This means if you don't heal for about 10 seconds or more, all your progress will be gone. I am going to bundle up these next two status effects because they're basically the same. They're very simple to explain. They just kind of do the opposite of each other. So Haste, it makes you move faster. It's a movement speed buff. And then you've got Hindered, and it's a movement speed debuff. So let's say that you use Sprint Burst, you now go faster for a couple seconds. That's the Haste status effect. On the other hand, if you move slower by some sort of debuff, you will now have the Hindered status effect. It's very simple. Next up, we have got the Incapacitated status effect. And what this effect does is it makes it so that survivors cannot touch anything. They cannot do survivors, that sounds so wrong. They cannot do generators, they cannot heal, they cannot interact with anything until the timer is over. Next up, we have got a very unique status effect that belongs to the Doctor. It's called Madness, and you've probably heard of it before. So this comes from Doctor's power, and it's pretty interesting because it does a lot of things. There's 3 tiers of Madness. There's tier 1, 2, 3, and it basically determines how mad your character is. It works with a point system, and every time you get hit by Doctor's power, you gain a point or half a point. So he has his shockwave that he does in front of him. That's half a point if you get hit by that. And then there's the blast, where he blasts his entire terror radius, and that gives you an entire full point. Whenever you go a tier up, you scream, and you go to the next tier of Madness every time you get a full point. So either you get blasted or you get hit 2 times with a shock therapy. If you hit Madness level 1, you have a 33% chance of getting more difficult skill checks. If you hit tier 2 of Madness, you'll get fake doctors all around the map. So you will see fake doctors standing around corners, standing next to you to basically jump scare you. Then you'll also, on top of that, have a 66% chance to get more difficult skill checks. And after that, you go to Madness tier 3, which is the most interesting Madness tier. There will be more fake doctors that Doctor himself can actually see through walls. So whenever you are in tier 3 and you see a doctor next to you, just assume that Doctor knows your position. And if that wasn't enough, you also cannot do anything at all until you do something which is called Snap Out of It. It's basically healing. You can compare it to mending. It takes 12 seconds, and once you finish it, you go back to Madness tier 1. You can never ever get out of Madness. You always go from 1 to 2 to 3, back to 1, 2, 3, back to 1, and you can never escape it. Next up, we've got one of the most simple status effects in the game, which is called Mangled. Just takes 25% longer to heal 1 health state when you have this. Once the health state is done, like you're in a new health state, it will be gone. Next up is one of my favorite status effects in the entire game, and it's called Oblivious. This is my favorite both as killer and as survivor, and what it does is that it takes away any sort of terror radius. You cannot hear the terror radius anymore. The reason this is so cool is because it makes the game more creepy, and as a killer it's fun to sneak up on people, and as a survivor it's just cool to have that tension of not knowing where the killer is. Keep in mind that the game will consider this to be that you're not in the terror radius at all, instead of just not hearing it. So any perk that says if you are in the terror radius blah 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 blah, it won't work because you are technically not in the terror radius, so keep that in mind. We have reached the second to last status effect, which is called Sleep Penalty. This one is unique to Freddy only, and basically what it does, whenever you're asleep, whenever you're playing against a Freddy, you can be woken up by someone, and every time you do this, the duration which it takes to wake up doubles. And this is basically the only thing this status effect does. Now last, and definitely not least, is the Undetectable status effect. And I can hear all the bubbas in their basements revving their chainsaws. What this does is it basically turns any killer into a stealth killer. So your terror radius goes away, your red stain goes away, your aura cannot be red, and you also don't make the jump scare noise when you move. And so yeah, basically turns you into stealth killer. As I promised at the start, we're now going to briefly go over all the indicators in the game. And basically the way Dead by Daylight does anything with colors, like indicating debuffs and buffs, they do it with 3 colors, either white, red, or gold, or yellow, whatever you want to call it. When it's white, that means that either it's going in normal speed, whatever you're doing, or you have normal chances of whatever is happening. Then there's red, which is a debuff, so anything you're doing is slower when it's red. Everything that you're attempting has a less chance of working when it's red. Then there's gold and yellow, which basically means you're either doing something faster or you have more chance of something succeeding. So starting off, we have the chance indicator, and this basically has to do with unhooking yourself. So when it's red, it means hold up, you have a lower chance of unhooking yourself, and when it's gold, it means that you have a bigger chance of unhooking yourself. For example, if you're running slippery meat, you have a bigger chance of unhooking yourself, so it will be gold. Next up is the efficiency indicator, and this one shows whether you're using your item more efficiently or less efficient. That means that whenever you're using your item less efficiently, that your charges will deplete faster, meaning it will show up in red. Now if you're using it more efficiently, meaning that your charges will be used up slower despite doing the same thing with your item, then it will show up in gold. Next up, we have 3 indicators that are very easy to explain. It's the healing, repairing, and sabotaging indicators. And basically what they do is they show if you're doing it faster, which is gold, and if you're doing it slower, which is red. Then in between all of those, there's one that's called the progression speed indicator, and it mixes a whole bunch of them together. For example, if you're on the ground and you're recovering yourself, you're using unbreakable, then it's going faster, so it will be gold. But the other way around, it would be red, of course. Then we've also got the indicator for skill check difficulty, and when this is gold, it means that your skill check will be bigger, so it will be easier for you to hit your skill check. The other way around, when it's red, it means that your skill checks will be smaller, and so it will obviously be way more difficult to hit. And then the very last indicator that we've got is called the Skillcheck Probability indicator, and if this is red, it means that there will be more skill checks. You have more chance of activating a skill check. If it's gold, it will mean that there's more chance that no skill checks will pop up. Earlier this video we discussed Doctor's Madness status effect, but it actually goes way deeper than what we went into during this video. So if you don't want to fall trapped to Doctor's Madness, make sure to watch this video as I explain exactly how you can counter Doctor.